Have you ever noticed how some ancient thinkers, people writing thousands of years ago, seem to speak right to us today, to our worries, our questions?
Yeah, it's uncanny sometimes.
Well, that's exactly the feeling you get with Lucretius.
Yeah.
He was this Roman philosopher, a poet, actually. And he just has this real appeal now. Maybe it's his, fierce hatred of superstition, his passion for intellectual freedom.
This sense of awe about nature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And his drive for scientific accuracy, this deep feeling for beauty, and just this constant awareness of natural law. It all feels very modern in a way.
Definitely.
So today we're doing a deep dive. We're unpacking some really fascinating bits from his huge philosophical poem, De Rerum Natura, which means On the Nature of Things. Perfect title, right?
Couldn't be better.
Our mission here is to pull out the key insights, the really important stuff from this amazing work, and show how this Roman guy was wrestling with questions that, well, you probably still think about today.
And what's so striking about Lucretius right from the start is how he grounds everything. His entire philosophy, really, it's built on one fundamental idea, the absolute certainty of our senses, sensation.
Sensation. How does that work?
Well, for him, it was simple. If your senses give you evidence for something, you accept it. It's true, period.
Yep.
And any idea, any hypothesis that contradicts what your senses tell you, you reject it.
Okay.
And here's the really clever part, I think. If your senses don't give you direct evidence one way or the other, then any explanation that could fit the facts that's consistent is basically equally possible. It's this really direct empirical method, quite something for his time.
So, okay, let's unpack that, this sense-first approach. How does it actually play out in how he sees the world? What's the first step?
Well, it's incredibly direct. Take the sun and the moon. He says, look, they're exactly the size we see them to be. That's the sense evidence.
No hidden cosmic scale or anything?
Nope. What you see is what you get, literally. But where it gets really powerful is how he uses what we can sense to figure out what we can't. For those imperceptible things, he always uses analogies from the perceptible world.
Okay, like what?
Think about wind. You can't see the actual the bodies of wind, right? But you absolutely see their effects, lashing the ocean, scattering clouds, tearing up trees.
Right? Like a flood, you can see the force of a flood.
Exactly. It's like the visible force of a flood, but unseen. Or think about smells. We smell them, but we don't see the scent particles going into our noses. We feel heat and cold, but don't see them. We hear voices, but don't see the sound itself traveling.
Okay, I see the pattern.
Or even like clothes hanging out to dry, they get damp and they dry out. That clearly shows moisture breaking up into tiny, tiny particles we can't see.
That's a great example. Simple observation.
And he keeps going. The way a ring wears down on your finger over years, dripping water, hollowing out a stone, a plowshare getting worn down in the field, paved streets getting thinner, even the brass hands on statues getting worn away by people touching them.
Wow, he really looked closely at the world.
He did. All these things show tiny particles leaving objects unseen. And the opposite too, growth. You know, nature adding little bits to things, or decay, like rocks being eaten away by salt spray near the sea. It all points to these unseen bodies, these particles, constantly at work. It all comes back to the senses or logical deductions from what they tell us.
So he's building this picture of the world based on these invisible particles, inferred from visible effects. It's like he's laying down the bricks, the atomic bricks of his universe.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And once he has this foundation, this idea of unseen particles based on sensory evidence, he doesn't just stop there, right? He builds his entire worldview on it, explaining everything from how the universe formed to how human society developed.
Absolutely. It becomes his universal key. Because our senses only give us evidence of a material world, matter is the ultimate reality for him. But, okay, if you have matter, you need movement, right? Things change, things interact.
Yeah.
And for movement, you need space. So that leads him to his two fundamental realities. Bodies, the atoms, and void, empty space.
Just those two.
Just those two. Nothing else can exist, fundamentally, because anything that exists must either be able to touch or be touched that makes it a body, an atom, or collection of atoms, or it must provide room for things to move that makes it void. There's no third option.
Okay.
And then he makes this interesting distinction between what he calls properties and accidents. Properties are things that are inseparable from an object, like weight is inseparable from a rock, heat from fire, or intangibility from the void itself.
Right, they're part of his definition.
Exactly. But then there are accidents, things like slavery, poverty, wealth, war. These are temporary conditions, things that happen to bodies in void over time, but aren't essential parts of them.
And what about time itself?
For Lucretius, Time isn't some separate thing floating around. It's an accident of things. It's a feeling, a perception we get from observing events happening past, present, future. It arises from the interactions of bodies in the void.
Okay, this is where it starts to get really radical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if everything is just atoms and void operating by natural laws, how does that clash with the common beliefs of his day, especially religion?
Oh, it's a direct challenge, a head-on collision, really. His atomic system basically dismantles the whole foundation of conventional religion as he saw it. His goal, very explicitly, was to free people from what he saw as the two biggest sources of human misery.
Which are?
The fear of unpredictable gods messing with your life, and the terror of eternal punishment for your soul after death.
The big ones.
The biggest. So
Yeah.
for Lucretius, every single thing that happens, lightning, disease, growth, decay, it's all just the result of natural causes. Atoms moving in the void, falling because of their weight, bumping into each other, combining to form molecules, and eventually building up the entire universe.
No divine plan,
Yeah.
no creator.
None. Nature acts according to its own laws. There's no design, no purpose behind it. The atoms just do what atoms do. Now, he does include the gods in his system, but not in the way you'd expect.
How so?
He believed the gods were real and immortal, but they were also part of nature's creation, made of special atoms. They lived apart, serene in the interspaces between the worlds, completely untroubled by and uninterested in human affairs.
So they're not intervening or answering prayers?
Not at all. They exist as sort of perfect examples of tranquility, atraxia, this untroubled calm that humans should aspire to. But they aren't pulling the strings, and crucially, the soul.
The soul is just atoms, too.
Just atoms. A corporeal aggregate of atoms is his phrase. A physical collection of very fine particles mixed in with the body. And when the body dies, these soul atoms just disperse back into the void like everything else.
So no afterlife, no punishment, no reward.
Exactly. Nothing to fear. Death is simply the end of sensation. Understanding this, understanding the nature of things, Lucretius believed, frees us. It frees us from the tyranny of religion and the crippling fear of death. It lets us live a life based on reason and ultimately pleasure, the calm pleasure of a mind free from disturbance.
Okay, but wait. If everything is just atoms falling and colliding according to natural laws, doesn't that sound completely deterministic? Like everything is preordained by the initial fall of atoms. Where does human freedom, free will, fit into that picture?
Ah, that's the brilliant part. He anticipates that very problem. And his solution is this incredibly subtle, almost poetic idea he introduces in Book 2, the swerve of the atoms, the Kleineman.
The swerve, what's that?
Okay, so imagine atoms falling straight down through the void because of their weight. Mostly, they fall in parallel lines, but, Lucretius says, at completely random times and places, an atom will make a tiny, unpredictable swerve, just a minuscule deviation from its path.
And that's enough.
That's enough. It's uncaused, spontaneous. This tiny swerve initiates collisions that wouldn't otherwise happen. It breaks the chain of cause and effect that would otherwise determine everything. It's the source of novelty, the reason things combine in the first place. And crucially, for humans, it's the physical basis for free will.
How does this swerve allow for free will?
Because if our minds, our souls, are also made of atoms, this tiny element of randomness means our actions aren't purely determined by the chain of past events or external forces. There's a little bit of, well, unpredictability built into the very fabric of matter. It prevents our minds from being constrained by an inner necessity, as he puts it. It's his way of saving agency in a material universe governed by law. Pretty ingenious, really. And digging a bit deeper into the soul and mind, he keeps emphasizing they're mortal, they die with the body. He says they're made of extremely fine atoms, much smaller and quicker than, say, water or smoke particles.
Finer atoms. Did he say what kind?
He actually proposed 4 types making up the soul. Atoms of wind, like breath, heat, air, like calm air, and then this mysterious 4th nature. He doesn't name it, but describes it as even finer, nimbler, the soul of the whole soul. The very thing that first initiates sensation throughout the body.
4 elements for the soul.
Yes, a composite structure. And this physical atomic nature is why, he argues, the mind and soul are affected by physical things. Think about getting sick or the effects of wine.
Right, intoxication definitely affects the mind.
Exactly. He points out how wine causes a heaviness, staggering, slurred speech, a clouded mind. These physical effects on our mental state prove, for him, that the mind and soul are physical, corporeal, and therefore mortal, destructible. They suffer along with the body.
That makes sense within his system.
And he also pushes back against simpler ideas, like the mind just looking out through the eyes as if through windows. He says, no, the eyes themselves feel the sensory input. They are directly affected by the images coming from objects.
Images. Okay, so this brings us back to the senses. If everything is atoms, how does he explain the incredible variety of what we sense? Like, why does honey taste sweet and wormwood bitter? How do different shapes of atoms account for that?
It all comes down to the shapes and textures of the atoms involved. That's his master key for explaining sensory differences. For taste, he figured smooth, round atoms create pleasant sensations, think honey, but hooked, jagged, and tangled atoms, those cause bitter or harsh tastes, like wormwood.
So atomic shape equals sensory quality.
Pretty much. Same for smell. Different atomic shapes fit differently into the pores of our nose or affect different animals differently. That's why bees love the atoms coming off honey, but vultures are drawn to the different atoms rising from corpses.
Okay. And sound.
Sound, too, is physical for him. Corporeal emissions, streams of particles. Rough atoms make harsh sounds. He uses the example of a screeching saw. Smooth atoms make smooth, pleasant sounds, like melodies. And voices, which are complex, spread out widely because their atoms scatter, like sparks flying off in all directions, filling every space.
He's really trying to give a physical mechanism for everything. What about sight? How do we see things?
This is one of his most famous ideas. He proposed that objects constantly shed these ultra-thin films, like skins or rinds, from their surfaces. He called them idols, or images.
Like tiny flying copies of the object.
Exactly. Incredibly thin, incredibly fast-moving like light. They stream off objects in all directions, travel through the air, and strike our eyes, creating the sensation of vision.
Wow. And how do we perceive distance then?
He thought the idols push air ahead of them as they travel. The more air they push between the object and our eye before they hit, the further away the object seems. It's a mechanical explanation again.
And color. If atoms make up everything, do atoms have color?
No, interestingly, he argues atoms themselves are colorless. Color is an accident, remember. It arises from the way different shapes of atoms are arranged together and how they interact with light. He points to things like the shifting colors on a dove's neck or a peacock's tail.
Right, they change depending on the angle of the light.
Precisely. That shows color isn't inherent in the atoms themselves, but depends on their structure and the light conditions.
So, given all this idols flying off things, atoms having shapes, what does this mean for how reliable our senses are? If we see a square tower looking around from far away, are our senses lying?
This is crucial for her. Sensation itself is always true. Always. In the case of the round-looking square tower, our eyes are accurately reporting the idol that reaches them after traveling through all that intervening air, which has maybe distorted it or blurred its edges. The sense reports truthfully what it receives.
So the error isn't in the seeing.
It's in the mind. The mind draws a wrong inference or fails to account for the conditions like distance and air. To deny that basic sensations are true for Lucretius is disastrous. It pulls the rug out from under everything, all knowledge, all reasoning, even our ability to navigate the world safely. If you can't trust your senses, what can you trust?
That's a powerful point. You need some foundation. Okay, so we've got atoms, void, sensation, the soul. Let's zoom out. What about the big picture? The world itself. Does it last forever in his view?
No, definitely not. Just like everything else made of atoms, the world itself is mortal. It had a beginning, and it will eventually have an end. It will dissolve back into its constituent atoms.
What's his evidence for that?
He points to things we can see. Ancient monuments crumbling, stones wearing away. He even suggests the earth itself is getting old, worn out like an old woman, he says, producing less, struggling more. These are signs of decay, indicating mortality.
And how did it begin? Not divine creation, obviously.
Right, no design. It was the result of a massive, chaotic, chance swirling of atoms in the infinite void over immense periods. Eventually, heavier atoms naturally sank down, forming the earth and sea. Lighter ones floated up, becoming the air and the fiery ether. The earth, he says, was originally the mother of all things. First, it spontaneously produced plants, then animals, and finally humans.
Okay, here we go. This sounds incredibly modern again. He's basically talking about a kind of abiogenesis and evolution. How does he explain which species survived and which didn't?
It's astonishingly close to natural selection, survival of the fittest. He imagines a time when the early Earth produced all sorts of creatures, including many monstrous or malformed ones.
Like experiments of nature.
Exactly. But most of these early forms perished. Why? Because they lacked the necessary tools for survival. Maybe they couldn't find food or reproduce or defend themselves. They didn't have the right craft or bravery or swiftness.
So only the ones suited to their environment made it.
Precisely. Only the species that were adaptable or useful in some way managed to survive and propagate. He mentions lions surviving due to bravery, foxes through cunning, deer through speed. And some animals, like dogs or sheep, survived because they became useful to humans and gained our protection.
And what about mythical creatures, like centaurs?
He dismisses them as impossible combinations. A horse matures much faster than a human. Their metabolisms, their lifespans, their physical natures just don't align. Such combinations couldn't actually form or sustain themselves according to natural laws. It has to be physically viable.
That's incredible foresight. And what was early human life like, in his view, before civilization?
He paints a picture of primitive humans as much tougher, hardier than us, living more like wild animals, really, in woods, caves, forests, no farming, no settled homes, no common laws, or even stable family units initially. Life was basic, finding food like acorns and berries, seeking shelter. Mating was promiscuous, often based on strength or simple exchange. And the dangers were different, not shipwreck, because they didn't sail, but attacks from wild beasts or starvation. It was a rough, often solitary life.
So how did we get from that state to building cities and writing philosophy poems? What were the steps?
He sees a gradual, natural progression. Key developments were discovering fire maybe from lightning strikes, learning to make clothes from skins, and building huts. These things offered comfort and protection and led to a softening of the human race, making us less physically hardy but allowing for closer communities.
And language? Did someone invent it?
No, he thought language arose naturally, organically. Different feelings prompted different types of utterances, different sounds. He points to animals, dogs snarling when angry, whining when sad, horses neighing differently depending on their mood. If animals do that naturally based on feeling, why wouldn't humans? The specific words developed over time through convention, but the impulse to communicate vocally based on inner states was natural.
That makes sense. What about society and laws?
Well, eventually, strong individuals, kings, started building fortified cities for protection and power. They gathered followers, distributed resources. But, he suggests, this early monarchy often led to arrogance and instability, and was eventually overthrown by the populace, maybe tired of violence or inequality.
Leading to democracy.
Not quite democracy as we know it, but to the establishment of laws and magistrates. People became weary of constant violence and feuding. Out of this wariness, and crucially, a fear of punishment, they agreed upon laws and appointed officials to enforce them. It was a pragmatic step towards stability.
And religion, where did that fit into this progression?
He thought religion arose from early humans perceiving powerful, glorious images of gods, both in waking visions and, perhaps more importantly, in dreams. These beings seemed immortal, incredibly happy, powerful. And because early humans didn't understand natural causes, they attributed awe-inspiring things like storms or the movements of stars to these gods.
Ignorance leading to awe and fear.
Exactly. Awe turned into fear, fear led to worship, building temples, performing rituals, all in an attempt to appease these perceived powerful beings and understand a world that seemed chaotic and mysterious. It stems from that lack of understanding the inner law of nature.
And alongside social development, what about tools and technology? How did humans go from using sticks and stones to working metals?
Again, a natural progression based on observation and need. He thought fire was key. Maybe a forest fire melted some ore in the ground. Humans saw this liquid metal, realized it could be shaped when hot and hardened when cool.
And they started making things.
Right. First weapons, then tools for farming and building. He notes that bronze was likely used before iron, simply because it was softer, easier to work, and perhaps more readily found or extracted. Iron came later, being harder but ultimately more useful.
Did he mention warfare?
Yes. He even describes early attempts at warfare, using wild animals trying to send bulls, boars, even lions against the enemy. But he points out this often backfired badly, as the enraged animals couldn't distinguish friend from foe and caused chaos. Humans learned quickly that trained soldiers were more reliable.
And farming.
He thought nature itself was the first teacher. Humans saw acorns and berries falling and sprouting new plants. That gave them the idea to deliberately plant seeds and later to graft branches, gradually improving crops and domesticating plants. It's all presented as humans learning from nature, applying reason to what they observe.
So putting this all together, his aim seems to be to provide a completely natural explanation for everything. stripping away any need for divine intervention or mysterious forces. How does this apply to everyday natural events, the things people really attributed to the gods?
Absolutely, that's central to his project. Take thunderstorms. People saw lightning, heard thunder, and thought, that's Jupiter being angry. Lucretia says, hold on, look at the clouds. They're like mountains piled high in the sky. Wind gets trapped inside them.
Okay.
This trapped wind swirls violently, generating friction, heat, and fire. Eventually, the pressure builds up, the cloud bursts, and zap, that's lightning. The sound wave follows, that's thunder. It's physics, basically, not divine fury.
And he directly challenges the religious view.
Oh, explicitly.
Yeah.
He asks really pointed questions. If Jupiter is throwing thunderbolts, why does he so often hit empty deserts or the ocean or his own temples? Why strike innocent people instead of the guilty? Why does he seem to need storm clouds to do it? Why not just hurl them from a clear blue sky whenever he feels like it?
Good questions. Undermining the logic of superstition.
Exactly. He does the same for earthquakes, argues they're caused by vast amounts of wind and air trapped underground, either violently bursting out or causing tremors as they move through subterranean passages.
And the sea level staying constant.
Simple balance. Evaporation, sun, wind, clouds drawing moisture up removes just as much water as rivers and rain pour in. No magic needed.
What about volcanoes like Mount Etna?
Same principle as earthquakes, really. Wind trapped in huge underground caverns gets intensely heated by friction with rock, builds pressure, and eventually bursts out, carrying flames, ash, and molten rock. A natural furnace.
And those poisonous places, the Avernian spots he mentions, where birds supposedly drop dead.
He explains those as areas where the Earth naturally emits noxious fumes, poisonous gases. These fumes corrupt the air locally, killing birds or animals that inhale them. He notes different animals have different tolerances, linking it back to their specific atomic makeup and what they need to survive. It's all part of the varied but ultimately material nature of the Earth.
This idea of invisible effluences, these emissions from things, seems really key to his explanations, which brings up a fascinating puzzle. How on earth did he explain something like magnetism? That must have seemed purely magical back then.
It did seem magical, but Lucretius, true to form, refused to accept a supernatural explanation. He offered an incredibly detailed, purely mechanical atomic theory for it. It's quite something.
Okay, I have to hear this. How did he think magnets attract iron?
Right. Get this. He proposed that the magnet stone constantly emits a stream of incredibly fine particles and effluents. This stream flows out and physically pushes the air out of the space between the magnet and the piece of iron.
Creating a vacuum.
Exactly. It parts the air, creating a void, a vacuum in that space. Now, the atoms of the iron are naturally agitated, and they're also being constantly bombarded by air particles from behind. When that vacuum opens up in front of them,
They rush into it.
precisely, the atoms at the front of the iron rush into the newly formed void. And because iron atoms are tightly interlinked, they pull the whole piece of iron, the whole ring, along with them.
Wow. And there's more.
He adds that the air behind the iron ring also helps, pushing it forward into the empty space. And even the air inside the porous structure of the iron itself contributes, buffeting the ring towards the vacuum. It's like a coordinated push and pull, all caused by atomic motion and the temporary void.
That is remarkably intricate. Did he explain why it only works on iron?
Yes, he tried to. He suggested that some materials, like gold, might be too heavy, their atoms too dense for the effluence to move them. Others, like wood, might be too rare, too porous, so the effluence just passes through without creating the necessary vacuum or connections. He even tried to explain repulsion, like why brass sometimes seems to push iron away, suggesting the brass effluence somehow disrupts the pores of the iron needed for the magnet's connection. It's all about particles fitting into pores or hooking onto each other.
It's amazing how far he pushed this atomic explanation, trying to cover every base with just atoms and void.
It shows his absolute commitment to finding natural causes for everything, no matter how strange it seemed.
Okay, shifting from the wider world back to us, to the human condition. He talked about the soul being mortal. What about the body's vulnerability? Did he discuss disease?
Yes, quite extensively, especially in the final part of the poem. He observes how different places seem prone to specific diseases, mentioning elephantiasis being common in Egypt or foot problems in Athens. He clearly saw a link between environment and health.
And plagues, epidemics.
Absolutely. He gives this harrowing, incredibly detailed description of the Great Plague that struck Athens. He describes it as a deadly force, a noxious air, perhaps originating far away, maybe Egypt, that traveled and corrupted the local sky, the water, the food, or People simply inhaled these seeds of disease. It caused devastation among humans and animals alike.
And his description of the symptoms
Yeah.
is drawn from historical accounts, right? Sounds terrifying.
It is. He depicts the burning heads, inflamed eyes, throats raw and bleeding, the chest constricted, the foul breath, the utter exhaustion, the trembling limbs, the eventual disfigurement, ulcers, even loss of memory or limbs for those few who survived. It's brutally realistic.
A truly horrific picture.
And he doesn't shy away from the social breakdown either. The despair that made people give up and die quickly, the abandonment of the sick by terrified relatives, and the tragic irony that those who did try to help often caught the disease themselves and died. It shows the fragility of society in the face of overwhelming natural disaster.
So after painting this picture of suffering, decay, and the terror of the plague, how does he offer any comfort? It seems like the fear of death, which he calls the root of all evil, is pretty justified when you read that. Where's the solace in his philosophy?
It comes back, yet again, to knowledge. His core argument remains absolutely consistent. Understanding the true nature of things is what liberates us. Yes, plagues are terrible, death is real, but understanding why they happen, seeing them as natural processes, however harsh, removes the added terror of divine punishment or an eternal afterlife of suffering.
So knowledge disarms the fear, even if it doesn't remove the event itself.
Precisely. He argues that it's the fear of death, the ignorance about what comes after, that poisons life. It's what drives avarice people desperately trying to accumulate wealth as if it could buy immortality. It drives ambition, political strife, crime, even betrayal of family and country, all stemming from this fundamental dread.
The darkness of the mind, as he calls it.
Exactly. He uses that powerful analogy. Just as children are scared of things in the dark that aren't actually dangerous, adults often fear things in broad daylight like death simply because they are ignorant of their true nature. This mental darkness, he insists, can't be scattered by sunlight. It can only be dispelled by understanding nature, the outer view, and the inner law of nature.
So knowing death is just the end, the dissolution of atoms.
Yes. Knowing that consciousness simply ceases, that the soul atoms disperse, means there's nothing to dread after death. We have naught to fear in death, he famously writes, and that he who is no more cannot be wretched. You cease to exist, so you cease to suffer or worry. That knowledge, for Lucretius, is the ultimate source of tranquility.
It's really quite profound when you put it all together. This relentless drive to explain everything from the tiniest atom to the whole cosmos, from sensation to society, all through natural laws, all aimed at freeing the human mind.
It's an astonishing intellectual achievement. He's like an ancient physicist, biologist, anthropologist, psychologist, all rolled into one, using this atomic toolkit to build a coherent, God-free picture of reality. And the goal is always therapeutic, to cure us of fear.
And connecting that back to us, to you listening, Lucretius seems to be saying that the universe runs on consistent, understandable laws. And grasping those laws, really internalizing them, is the path to living a calm, free life.
Exactly. His pursuit wasn't just knowledge for knowledge's sake. It was aimed squarely at human well-being, peace of mind. It was radical then, and it still feels pretty relevant now, this idea that understanding the world helps us live better in it.
Which leads to this incredible line near the end where he talks about Epicurus, his philosophical hero. He says basically that a good life requires a clean heart, a mind free from disturbance, and that the person who provides the sweet solaces for life that achieve this, that person is more rightly called a god than any mythological figure.
It's an amazing statement.
It really is. So what does this mean? For Lucretius, the highest form of reverence, maybe even worship, isn't about rituals or fearing gods. It's the active, ongoing pursuit of knowledge, the effort to understand nature, because that pursuit is what brings true mental peace, true solace. Philosophy itself becomes the liberating force.
The path to tranquility.
So here's a final thought for you to take away. Even today, with all our science, how much of our own modern anxieties, our stresses, maybe still come from fears we haven't fully examined? From a lingering feeling that things are random or hostile, or that we don't understand the nature of things around us or within us? Could it be that the real path to calm still lies in engaging with that inner law of nature that Lucretius explored with such passion, such brilliance all those centuries ago?